Hi, this is Witchy.
Hi, this is Roberta.
We're sitting here together in real life, finally, and it's the holiday season.
That's right, and the most famous American true crime case, or one of them, occurred right around that time.
Which one was it?
It was the case of JonBenet Ramsey.
So let's talk about JonBenet Ramsey. This is a case that has been in my mind since it started when I was 13. But before we start, I want to mention that we know a lot about this because these were very prominent people, very wealthy people who had a lot of resources available to them. And in fact, a lot of this case has a lot to do with PR. But this kind of crime, which is filicide, is way more common than many Americans want to believe.
450 children are killed by their parents each year in America, and 70% of the time it is the dad who's responsible, even though it's more likely for the cases of the mothers that kill their children to be the more famous publicized cases.
Right, and often, when people want to point out women and kind of call out their flaws, they'll talk about how they murder their own children all the time. But that's just a patent lie. And like a lot of true crime, this happens more often than we'd like to admit. Of course, the details in this case are particularly captivating and unusual. There's a lot of theories out there. There's a lot of stuff going on. Recently, one of the theories is the idea that JonBenet's brother did it. This is called the BDI, Burke did it theory.
That's how it's abbreviated online, BDI.
Right?
Burke did it. RDI is Ramsey's did it.
Yeah.
And IDI is Intruder did it.
Right.
That's
the intruder theory is very popular.
I mean, how many true crime cases have their own abbreviation? That's so crazy.
Really haven't, other than like BTK or something like that.
Right. So that's the name of the.
That's the
that
name
was
of the
a
dude.
nickname. That was an abbreviation made online. Yeah,
that's the name of the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I believe her parents are responsible. What do you think?
I agree, and I actually did a video where I said that was my unpopular opinion, like so many of my unpopular opinions.
Or my unpopular opinion. So how did the BDI or Burke did it theory start?
Well, it was always floating around in the background, or there was always a small faction of people that believed that theory. But when James Kohler, who was the investigator on the case, wrote the book Foreign Faction in 2000 and published it in 2012, that's when it really gained traction, yeah. And when ABC revisited the Ramsey case in 2016, that changed the Burke did it, the BDI theory, from being a kind of
fringe
theory to being the most popular theory right now on the case. And I have watched this change because it used to be ridiculously the intruder theory,
right?
Because the Ramseys put in a lot of money to PR. The press still supports that theory a lot. When I was looking at articles about this case, I looked at a People magazine article, and they were basically trying to sell the intruder theory with that the Ramseys lived in a bad neighborhood and that there was this many sexual offenders.
Yeah, a bad neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado.
And the wrong side of Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, the wrong side of the tracks in Boulder.
Right.
And you're saying, like, this theory became really popular because ABC used a lot of so-called experts. Who are they?
These are all experts. It was amazing that they could collect so many experts that let me say that I raise my eyebrows when I see them.
Yeah.
They had Henry Lee, who is the most famous blood expert in the world, who came to fame in the O.J. Simpson case. He was the blood expert in Michael Peterson's case, the staircase case.
He gets around.
He basically, and he looked like in the staircase that he is really motivated right now, at least in his career, by fame and money. And he will say pretty much anything within reason that you want him to say on the stand for money. That's what it looked like. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's what it looked like to me from watching The Staircase. Jim Clemente, who is one of my least favorite experts. He's a former FBI guy. I don't know exactly. I think he worked in...
You're always talking about how these people, you want to know how they stopped working for the FBI, right? Like former FBI employee. It never says like retired or now is an author or something like this. It's just former FBI employee. Like,
right. Somehow that was not satisfying career anymore for him, and he went to write. He wrote for one of those true crime shows. I can't think of the name right now, but he was also I can't say that he was paid. I don't know that for sure. But he was a shill of Amanda Knox. And he went on so many different types of media and lied about her case over and over again. And he did one thing that I thought he would argue also on Twitter with non-Amanda Knox supporters and say, I'll debate you. And he always chickened out. So I think he knows that these are untruths that he's telling about her case. So he's not a favorite of mine. Also, Varner Spitz, who was the West Memphis 3, the guy who came up with the ridiculous turtle predation theory.
Right, a turtle bit someone's.
Right, and he was also a big proponent of the single bullet JFK theory, which our Senator Arnold Specter, Pennsylvania, created and it's a ridiculous theory, in my opinion. I mean, common sense.
Right. So, going back to theories and this Burke did it theory and kind of just being ridiculous, I always wonder, why do people believe this? Why is it more easily believed than the parents doing it? Why would people prefer this theory over over the theory that the parents were the perpetrators?
This is really interesting because I think it says a lot about the time that we live in, where there's so much information that people really don't look into things, that we're a slick culture, and it was a bright and glossy and very well done and very convincing special that ABC put out in 2016, and it looked like these experts knew way more than we did about the case and true crime, and they were really, like they always do, investigating from a neutral position, that they had no agenda. Right. And
even though the Ramseys got out in front of this really quickly.
Right.
Like the second it happened.
Right. And, you have to say that they have to have some agenda to make people watch. And should they come out with a theory that the Ramseys did it, that is not nearly as exciting as the new theory. They had to pick something new, something different. So they came up with this, and they really sold it to the public, and people bought it unquestioned. Some people bought it without really questioning it or without looking into the case. It's all spoon-fed to you. So that's easy. And secondly, pedophilia is the most uncomfortable topic one of the most uncomfortable topics in our country.
Right, it's a taboo.
And when you make the Burke did it theory, you take out the pedophilia in this, the incest in this.
Right.
The Burke theory is really about how he tortured his sister. It's not so much about sexual abuse. And the Ramseys did it theory is really based around the medical records, the autopsy records, and the pageantry also, that indicate that she was sexualized. Right.
Yeah, they always talk about how he was a disturbed child. He often would spread his feces on walls. JonBenet herself would wet the bed all of the time. But these factors are usually just indications that these children were abused, which makes me believe that the parents were the ones responsible for this.
And what really sealed the deal was when Burke, I think he must regret this decision, went on Dr. Phil and had an interview. And that was another thing people could point to. Look at him. He smiled
he
through
stop smiling.
Right. He smiled through the whole interview. And instead of people reading that as this is a really uncomfortable, nervous tic, it became evidence of him being creepy and dark.
Right, and what did you say about someone being raised by the Ramseys?
Yeah, you would be weird. You would be weird if you were raised in the Ramsey home.
Yeah.
They're very odd. I mean, look at those interviews. Also, those interviews were a distant memory to people. Mm-hmm. Really, how many people have really sat through, like I have, or as crazy as I am, to sit through the Ramsey interviews, the old Ramsey interviews? They look like strange people. And really out of touch. And they do not look like grieving parents.
Yeah, people always tell you to disregard the way that these kinds of people present themselves, like, oh, what is a normal, quote-unquote, normal emotional reaction? Well, I don't think when I watch the Ramseys be interviewed that their reactions are normal to this at all.
It's so funny. That thing, like, you never know how you'll react. Everyone's different. Only seems to come up in context of a accused or convicted murderer.
Yeah.
You know, we only need to use that. We only have to negate their weird. They're the ones always acting weirdly. People who are accused of a crime and professing their innocence. The greatest one I have to note was Amanda Knox, who in the Diane Sawyer interview, they were talking about the cartwheels and the splits she did in the police
room?
Yeah,
police
she was waiting
station?
to police station. Thank you.
Holding room?
Yeah, police station. She was waiting for her boyfriend to be interviewed, and she was doing all sorts of inappropriate things. And she sat across from Diane Sawyer and said with a straight face, "Everyone's reaction to something tragic is different."
Right. It's become this thing that we regurgitate to make ourselves feel better about people lying to us.
Right.
I think.
So true.
I mean,
so true.
That's how I feel about it.
So true.
And another part of this case that makes it completely bizarre is the pageantry that was involved in JonBenet. And this sort of thing was not popular at the time, but now it's been completely normalized. What do you remember from when this happened about pageantry?
I'm a little older than you are. And I remember it really well because it was like this freak show, sideshow, bearded lady type thing for most Americans. And they played, no one had heard of these child pageants before.
Right.
We had never seen them. And they played the tapes of JonBenet Ramsey in that cowboy hat outfit over and over and over again. And it was just pretty much
like this smiling, programmed doll. She looked like not even real to me when I was that age, and it was so shocking to see a girl looking like that as young as she was. And I mean, that's completely sexualizing a young girl. And even at 13, it made my stomach turn.
Right. It really brought Americans together, no matter if you were from the left or the right. And, everybody agreed that this was bad and revolting and stomach-turning and distasteful and disgusting and not right. That was really the thing. Like, that was the uniform decision, pretty much, of Americans that weren't involved in it themselves, and the small, percent of people who were actually doing these involved in these pageants.
Yeah, and now it's completely normal, and there's toddlers and tiaras, and people argue that pageant culture fosters confidence, but we've had this conversation. I mean, there are a million other things you can do to foster confidence in children. Why would you paint them with makeup?
Yeah.
And, make them twirl a baton.
It's interesting because I just recently, I think in the last 6 months, just gave up wearing makeup. And I think it's like one of the best decisions I ever made. And I feel that people treat me much better now that I'm not, much more seriously now that I'm not wearing, I never wore a lot of makeup, but not wearing makeup. And so I think it's one of those things that they tell women, to dress for you, to wear perfume for you, to wear makeup, to wear heels, to wear, things that immobilize you, like high heels for you.
Right, and spend all your time and money on this thing for you. And it's not being presentable or quote unquote effable.
No, and I think someone said the best thing to me, I guess the thing that made me give it up was that it's not empowering if you if people who have real power are doing, like
right,
men.
if men aren't, but I mean, and now men are, and we can talk about that in a different show.
They're not wearing makeup like the hooker makeup that they're telling women to wear, right? Like all that shiny
I guess not
stuff.
every day.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Jeffree Star does in his daily life.
Oh, no, okay. How much power does Jeffree Star have? He has a lot of money more than power, I'd say.
That's a good point. And I actually believe that these contests are basically a step close to child abuse. I mean, they sexualize young girls. It's almost like Munchausen's. And Patsy Ramsey was a pageant queen as a young woman. And I believe that's why it was so easy for her to perform all of those lies during their expensive PR campaign.
She was an awesome liar. That I have to give Patsy Ramsey. She was an awesome liar.
Yeah, she's really good at spinning that whole ransom note that she continues to deny. Well, she's passed away, but yeah, she continuously denied that ransom note.
And here's an interesting fact about Patsy Ramsey. She was diagnosed in 1993, 3 years before this crime, with stage 4 ovarian cancer. Mm-hmm. And, if this were really an accident, and I don't understand why she wouldn't come forward and say it was some kind of accident, she fell in the tub, blah, 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 more than covering up for her son. Do you know what I'm saying? Why would you come up? I'm saying it would be easy for her to gain sympathy in the court.
Yeah, that's one of the things, too, that you point out. What parents have ever...
No, I said this when I made my last video. I said, if you know of another case where one sibling killed the other sibling, mm-hmm. and the parents staged an elaborate scene to protect the killer child, let me know. Please send me a link. Lots of people said, I know lots of cases like that. Please, not one has been found. Yeah. So I still put that challenge out to my audience. Find me a case where it's ever happened before.
Yeah, where the parents go through such great lengths.
Stage an elaborate scene to protect a child who's killed another one of their children. Yeah. Another child, a sibling.
Right.
It's a little hard to put together.
Yeah, and I just want to briefly talk about pageant culture again and how Patsy herself was involved in pageantry, and it sort of is this cycle of femininity that's enforced on women. And it was a way for Patsy Ramsey, who was from a kind of disadvantaged background, to ascend ranks within patriarchy. That's what makeup's all about. That's what this presentation's all about. It's the only way, really, for women to ascend in this system. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you get cookies from men for conforming. Mm-hmm. But it's different than respect,
No, it's not respect, I don't think.
It's not respect, and, I think there's all sorts of ways with aligning yourself with men that you get validation from men, but that is definitely one way to have that really conventional. And you'll hear men say, well, look at her, she looks like a woman. Like, that looks like a woman. But
what a real woman.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's just very artificial, and it's very slick, and it's getting... What's concerning me is the makeup culture. Mm-hmm. I always call it hooker makeup. I'm sorry if that's not politically correct.
Our friend calls it slave paint.
Yeah. Leah is great, who has a great channel. Calls it slave paint.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would go that far, but I think that what the kind of makeup that they're teaching girls
Stage
to put
makeup.
on.
It looks like theater makeup.
Is really drag queen makeup, stage makeup, and highlighting their cheeks
All
and
the
contouring your nose. It's wild makeup. This is not just like a little bit of eyeshadow game like I had going on.
Right,
know?
or like some eyeliner.
Yeah, it's
mascara.
I think it does, like pageantry itself, does encourage narcissism, but the attitude towards pageantry is totally changed. And with
and
Honey,
this is the case that did it.
This is the case that brought it to the mainstream, definitely, with the death of a child. So it didn't end well for JonBenet Ramsey. Mm-hmm. And you would think that that would discourage people, but it didn't. And it normalized it.
Yeah.
And when Honey Boo Boo came on the scene, she started in this pageant world, and her show ended because of pedophilia.
Yeah, it always somehow comes back to that. And people, they think this sort of thing when they do this to children is completely harmless. Child stars is another, I think, good example of how we exploit children, and definitely pedophilic aspects of that sort of thing. It's just wild. And it really was the first time I saw any girl that young wear that much makeup. It was just so crazy to me to see that.
And they put in fake teeth, spray tanned, they wax them, they
they wax young girls.
I mean, I wasn't allowed to have my ears pierced until I was 13, and that was a what do you say? My mom broke down when I was 13 finally, but that was considered too sexualized when I was growing up. So this is so far beyond any kind of norm.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's really it's a wild thing.
I think that's the only word I can use to describe it, really.
So I'd just like to ask the other interesting thing about the Burke Ramsey thing. I know I'm just circling back to it.
That's good though.
Is that people who I've seen discuss it online, who are believers in it, don't cite any of the real evidence. They haven't read Kohler's book that presents. It wasn't convincing to me, but he presents some, interesting evidence that you should look at. Mm-hmm. So don't just spit back the ABC.
Right.
Is it ABC?
I mean, I guess they don't teach media literacy anymore, but always kind of question the narrative that people are feeding you on these documentaries about crime or anything, really.
Always go back. We don't have any court records. That's the thing. So much of this is... that's also another interesting point. We don't have court documents. We don't really have case files.
What happened?
The grand jury. There was a grand jury decision, and they voted to indict the parents, and the district attorney decided not to. But that was hidden from the public for years.
Wow. So what do you think happened?
I don't really know. I think that John Ramsey abused JonBenet.
I agree.
She was named after her father. Mm-hmm. The way both of them talk about her with so little emotion, it's very odd. Very odd. I think Patsy Ramsey wrote the note, and we always say in these cases that it was we always imagine them to be accidents that were covered up because it's so hard for us to put ourselves in the mind of a parent that deliberately kills their children. Mm-hmm. But I don't,
or even hurts them in any way. I could never put my mind there.
Yeah. So I don't rule that out. That it was a deliberate. I never rule out deliberate murder.
Well, what do you think of the intruder theory? I
think it's ridiculous. I mean, that's just a theory that there's no evidence for, and it's sold. The greatest moment was the John Mark Carr moment, in the mid to early 2000s, maybe it was 2006, where this pedophile, they had done a documentary. Once again, a documentary features in this. That was wild, where they were hunting this pedophile who was online taking credit for JonBenet Ramsey's, right? So that documentary that was poorly researched and had an agenda behind the Denver, police go to Thailand where this weirdo pedophile, John Mark Carr, was. They extradite him back to Colorado. When he landed, the intruder theory supporters were all abuzz and excited, like, see, we finally got this dude that the mystery DNA belongs to. Although it wasn't a match, he didn't know the details of the crime other than what had been publicly released. It was just a PR disaster, and I encourage people to look at his interviews, not just because they're amusing in a dark way, but because it tells something about jumping to a convenient suspect or theory and what happens. So it was really a disaster for them, and that was really the death in the mainstream of the intruder theory in that deeply committed way that they were deeply committed to.
I love the story that I saw on one of these documentaries about the guy who tries to prove that the intruder came in through the basement.
Oh, that's a classic.
Right? But why was it debunked? How was it debunked? Because it's pretty funny, I think.
It was debunked because there was a cobweb that was untouched that had the intruder gone through the window the way he was. I believe there were other things that were set up differently than the way this investigator,
right?
This investigator deeply committed. These Denver, Colorado police don't know what they're doing, so I'll show you. They should have just gone through the window. And he goes through the window, and he goes and he does it effortlessly, and you're like, oh, I guess he could have gone through the basement window, but there was a cobweb. That was the unpopular thing. Not unpopular, the thing that killed that theory. Yeah.
The funny thing that killed the theory.
Thank you. I don't know why I said unpopular, but oh well.
No problem. Well, I think that it was John Ramsey. I really believe this. I believe that John Ramsey abused JonBenet often. That was probably the place that it happened, that it occurred in. I think things got out of hand, and he killed her. That's what I think. And actually, when I said that, you said that's actually a really popular theory.
No, not popular. I said the statistics back that up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. It is actually the Burke did it theory is the most popular theory.
Yeah, that's the most popular right now.
It does the statistics. If we were just going on statistics, that would be the most likely theory because fathers are 70% of the time responsible for killing their children. Mm-hmm. They're also more likely to plan out a murder, which is interesting that this was done Christmas.
Right.
Like Christmas, and I don't know. But you could also say that the mother did it, because mothers more. There's also statistics that bear out that mothers more often kill their children because of postpartum. They most likely kill their children under 1, so throw that out. But you could say also that the stress of her illness and Christmas had made Patsy Ramsey break. And she's also, Sina Wong, who is the handwriting expert, has very convincing evidence that Patsy Ramsey is the writer of the ransom note, also the language in it. So she's been identified by a bunch of different experts.
Yeah, I believe she wrote that note.
I believe she wrote that note. So they both worked to cover it up.
Yes.
So I think we've kind of, it's really great that we get to do this in person.
Yeah,
right?
This has been super fun. And I think we've covered what we wanted to. I mean, this case is famous. Lots of theories. People know so much about it already. I didn't want to do a show where we rehash kind of already known stuff.
Check out Trisha Griffiths has done fantastic podcasts on JonBenet Ramsey. She runs Web Sleuths, and she has done things with all sorts of different experts, including Sina Wong. I think she has the best podcasts on this that aren't mine, of course, but
okay.
Check her out.
Great. Well, I hope everyone's enjoying the season. It's cold out here where we are. But I did enjoy spending some time with you and your family. And I hope everyone's having a nice and safe holiday season.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Witchy.
Yeah. All right, guys.